Mr. Speaker, Bill S6 will make a positive difference in the lives of First Nations citizens. As the government has articulated clearly, this bill will enable First Nations to build stronger, more accountable governments that will lead to better futures for themselves, for their families, and for their communities. Mr. Speaker, before I go on, I'd like to advise the House that I plan to share my time with the most distinguished and the most effective member in the history of York Centre. S6, qui désormais sera la loi sur les élections des Premières Nations, donnera à tous les membres des bandes un système électoral auquel ils peuvent faire confiance. And when they exercise their democratic right, they will have the confidence that they are doing so within a strong system that is available to Canadians at elections held at all other levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal. Bill S6 is about empowering First Nations peoples with the tools that they need to hold their own governments to account and make informed decisions about their leadership. Il s'agit de s'assurer que les chefs et les conseillers disposent de la légitimité et de la stabilité politique nécessaires pour prendre les meilleures décisions possibles au nom de leur collectivité. En somme, on peut dire qu'il s'agit d'établir la confiance et le respect des gens envers leurs dirigeants et le système utilisé pour les élire. However, the proposed legislation does not just empower First Nation citizens. It offers a viable alternative to some of the most objectionable parts of the Indian Act related to elections, which hinders the ability of a First Nations leadership to improve the well-being of its community or attract and create economic and investment opportunities for that matter. Let me explain some of those shortcomings and how this has impacted First Nation governments and communities. The first serious failing of the Indian Act is that it limits elected officials' term of office to just 2 years. In contrast, federal, provincial, and most municipal governments generally have terms of 4 years. 2-year election terms places First Nation chiefs and councillors in a state of constant electioneering. It's like constant minority government. Cela empêche les dirigeants des Premières Nations de se concentrer sur des questions à long terme. Et ils ne disposent pas d'assez de temps pour planifier et mettre en œuvre des initiatives à long terme. Alors qu'ils sont fraîchement élus, les conseils de bande commencent à penser à la prochaine élection. As a result of this short-sightedness, First Nation governments often fail to build a proper foundation for community development. This concern has been expressed by both First Nation governments and residents who lament that this failing has created conditions of instability and missed opportunity. Tout cela a une incidence directe sur le développement économique et la création d'emplois. Les intervenants du secteur privé hésitent à investir dans de telles conditions d'incertitude. Au bout du compte, ce sont les collectivités des Premières Nations, les hommes, les femmes, les enfants, qui paient le prix le plus lourd de cette instabilité en raison des occasions manquées en développement des affaires et en création d'emplois. The First Nations' next bone of contention with the electoral system under the Indian Act is the process to nominate candidates, or should I say, lack thereof. Provisions in the Indian Act allow elections to go ahead even if the nominated person has no interest in running for office, or, as sometimes happens, is unaware that his or her name was on the ballot. By the way, we used to have this problem in Ontario. 90 years ago, my grandfather was elected reeve of a local township. He had to go and cancel his election the next day because he didn't seek the office. So once people are nominated, their name automatically appears on the ballot unless they withdraw in writing. If the ballots are already printed, a name stays on the ballot even if the candidate has withdrawn. Ainsi, les personnes n'ayant nullement l'intention de siéger au Conseil peuvent se retrouver dans cette situation et peuvent même être élues sans pour autant vouloir siéger. C'est une situation que mon grand-père a connue il y a 90 ans. That's not the only issue. The Indian Act and the Indian Ban election regulations also permit the same person to be nominated for both the chief and the councillor position. De plus, il n'y a aucune limite au nombre de candidats qu'une personne peut désigner. Il n'est pas rare d'avoir jusqu'à 100 personnes se disputer quelques postes au Conseil. Tous ces problèmes devraient être résolus avec l'adoption du projet de loi S6. Monsieur le Président, une autre préoccupation qui revient constamment est le système de bulletins de vote par correspondance en vertu de la loi sur les Indiens. We've all heard stories of people whose names were on the banned voter list sold their ballots to others. Unfortunately, these are not just rare occasions. Research suggests that in some parts of the country, the alleged buying and selling of mail-in ballots has been widespread. Since the Band Council provides the electoral officer with a list of addresses for mail-in ballots that may not or may be accurate up to date, situations like this can easily take place. First Nations electors and leaders have made it clear that they want a more rigorous process, one that assures them that ballots will only be mailed out to and cast by eligible voters. Ces inquiétudes sont aggravées par le fait que la loi sur les Indiens n'inclut aucune infraction ou peine pour les activités frauduleuses en lien avec le processus électoral dans les collectivités de Premières Nations. Pour le moment, toute personne souhaitant tromper le système est libre de le faire. Et si ces mêmes activités se produisaient dans le cadre d'élections fédérales, provinciales ou municipales, l'individu serait assujetti à une poursuite au criminel. So why are First Nations people expecting less? They don't. Finally, under the Indian Act, the power to investigate and make decisions about the validity of election results rests with the minister. This takes us back to a time when it was believed that the minister was the best person to oversee matters of band governance. This government does not agree. We believe that First Nations communities, not the minister, are best placed to make informed decisions about their own leadership, and First Nations governments are best placed to make decisions about their own affairs. That's why we want to empower them with the tools that they need to hold their own governments to account. In addition, the existing appeal system under the Indian Act is deeply flawed. It is incredibly complicated and lacks sufficient rigor and transparency to be effective. De plus, les résultats et le processus décisionnel y sont beaucoup trop longs. Un appel peut prendre de 6 à 18 mois avant d'être résolu, soit peut-être plus que la moitié du mandat de 2 ans d'un conseil de bande. Monsieur le Président, c'est pourquoi le projet de loi S6, une solution de rechange à la loi sur les Indiens, apporte plusieurs améliorations qui répondront à la demande des Premières Nations de disposer d'un système électoral plus fiable et plus rigoureux. This builds on Bill C-27, the First Nations Financial Transparency Act, which received royal assent earlier this year. Together, these two bills help to create the conditions that will encourage stronger, more stable, and effective First Nation governments based on the principles of accountability and transparency. Let me briefly highlight the main advantages of this bill for First Nations that choose to opt in these provisions. Premièrement, le projet de loi propose des mandats plus longs. Second, Bill S6 offers a more robust process to nominate candidates. First Nations will be free to bring in a fee for candidacy. And anomalies such as one person being elected to both the position of chief and councillor will be eliminated. Third, it outlines penalties for defined offences such as obstructing the electoral process or engaging in corrupt or fraudulent actions similar to those found in other election laws. Quatrièmement, le projet de loi S6 élimine le rôle du ministre dans les élections. Le ministre n'aurait plus de rôle à jouer quant aux appels en matière d'élection et au retrait des dirigeants élus. Ces décisions seraient prises par les tribunaux. J'exhorte les députés de la Chambre à soutenir l'adoption de cet important projet de loi. En terminant, j'aimerais souligner que vendredi prochain, le 21 juin, sera la Journée nationale des Autochtones au Canada. This date was chosen because it coincides with the summer solstice, a time when many Aboriginal peoples celebrate their culture and rich heritage. Et ce matin-là, à 7 heures, nous nous rencontrons à côté, au Château Laurier, pour le premier déjeuner national de prière parlementaire. And that evening, at 10:45, there will be a wreath-laying ceremony at the National Aboriginal Veterans Monument at Confederation Park on Elgin Street. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires, l'honorable député de Rivière-de-Mille-Île.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et encore une fois, les conservateurs essaient de bâtir un credo qui se veut positif envers les Premières Nations, mais ils refusaient de modifier leur discours pour que ce soit vraiment un discours de nation à nation. On a vu plus tôt dans cette Chambre, on a le débat sur Esther, un projet de loi émanant du Sénat, qui a pu donner à ce gouvernement une vraie occasion de faire quelque chose de positif pour les femmes autochtones. Mais malheureusement, ils n'ont pas écouté les préoccupations de ces groupes des femmes autochtones et ce projet de loi n'est pas appuyé par les personnes qui essaient d'aider. Donc, ce gouvernement qui veut gagner un credo peut-être féministe, je pense que ça déborde la ridicule, Monsieur le Président. Mais ma question pour mon collègue de l'autre bord, nous savons que les conservateurs ne répondent pas encore une fois aux problèmes réels liés à la gouvernance en choisissant de ne pas aborder les lacunes qui se trouvent dans la loi sur les Indiens. Pourquoi est-ce que les conservateurs refusent d'écouter les préoccupations légitimes exprimées par les groupes des Premières Nations?
L'honorable député d'Ottawa-Orléans.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Malgré un peu de difficulté que j'ai eue avec la diction de la députée d'en face, je dois vous dire que le projet de loi S6 que nous débattons présentement répond exactement aux préoccupations que les chefs de bande, les conseillers et les résidents des réserves nous ont demandé. C'est une façon de démocratiser les élections dans les bandes. C'est une façon de responsabiliser les gens des Premières Nations plutôt que de garder le grand Manitou du ministre. Ce ne sera plus le ministre qui décidera, ce seront les résidents des Premières Nations eux-mêmes.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for the Status of Women.
Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his comments as well. The Indian Act election system contains several weaknesses that contribute significantly to unstable First Nations governments. Among these principal weaknesses is the 2-year term of office. This short period of time simply doesn't allow First Nations to plan and implement important long-term projects for the benefit of their members. In many cases, when an election is held and leadership changes, progress can be set back. This instability does not make these First Nations attractive to long-term investment. I would like to ask my honourable colleague why Bill S6 is so necessary to go through right now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Ottawa-Orléans.
Many of the members of this House sat here through 3 minority governments where, admittedly or not, we were in a constant state of electioneering. This is not the proper way to do long-term planning. Some of us have had municipal experience, and you know, you do better long-term planning on longer cycles. Here, we have a four-year cycle. In provinces, there are 4-year cycles. Most municipalities in the country have 4-year cycles. Certainly in Ontario and Quebec, they do. Better work gets done that way. And this is a tool that will allow band councils to do the very same.
Question and commentaire, l'honorable député de Vaudreuil-Soulanges.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm not sure if I heard the member correctly. He said that this bill will effectively take the minister out of the picture. But from what I understand from clause 3A and B, the minister is still in the picture. It still has his paternalistic and colonial role for the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. So I'm not sure if I understood correctly. Is the member supporting what the Assembly of First Nations asked the Senate to do, and that is amend clause 3A and B by taking those out of the bill? Is that what the member was getting at?
The honourable member for Ottawa-Orléans.
Probably subsection C. Mr. Speaker, we have two choices here. The Paternalistic Indian Act or S2 that includes more transparency and more accountability and a better chance for Indian band councils to do long-term planning on their own terms. This is what we're doing here, and if they want to go to the bad old ways of the Indian Act, good for them. This is why the people of Canada, in their own wisdom, have chosen that the members on this side are in the government.
Resuming debate.